Now we've fixed most of the bugs and we have the ability to add items to this actions list. I think we're basically done functionality wise. We want to now add some drag and drop ability, and then we can move on to the home page and start making the main part of the application, which is to select these processes and then start querying SolidWorks for active files to run those jobs on. So let's just start with the drag and drop first. So let's first take a look at how we're going to implement drag and drop into this list. We can do it manually, or we can use some helper methods, but let's just take a quick look at how we think we would implement it. So we're going to start on the progress page view, or the process page view, and it's this actions list we want here. So it's this list view here we want to look at. So if we search for actions list, you can see it is this list box here that we want to add drag and drop to. Now, the first thing you might think is we'll start by monitoring for when we click and select an item, and then we want to hook into a drag and drop to start it. So if we move the mouse, we kick in a drag and drop event. To do that, then we'd have a on pointer press event inside of ultimately either the grid with the main element on, I'd say here. So we'd probably have a pointer pressed event here. And this will happen every time we click the item, or each item in the list. So now what we can do is we can use something called the drag data, and we can make a new data object. And this is where we can pass data around that we're dragging and dropping. And we then want to use the drag drop method. And for some reason, it doesn't want to show. Oh, now it's showing. That's strange. So we have the drag drop object, and we can do things on this. So inside of here, you can see we have drag enter and drag leave events, drag over events, all the events we need to hook up this drag and drop thing. So what we do is we do a do drag drop, and then we pass in the event, which is the pointer events, the drag data, which we can set up to something, and what we want it to be. So in terms of the effects that we're going to implement. So we can have the move, a link, a copy. So we'd want the move. And if we run that, we can see if we breakpoint on here just to make sure we hit it first. When we go to this list now, you can see we're not hitting that event. Oh, and there we go. So pointer press works that time, but not all the time. So we've got the pointer in the wrong place, because if you go to the border either side, it's not the item. But if you click on the actual text, it hits. So that's, one issue there. But we do start the drag drop. So if we uncheck that now, and if we click on here, and you can see when we drag now, we get this option to drag around. So that's now started the event. And what we need to do next is accept the drop. So this list would have to accept a drop. And when we drop it, we can then do things. But before we go down all that rabbit hole, this is a lot of work for dragging and dropping. And there's actually a library already that exists to do all of this for us. So we don't need to do that. We certainly could, but why reinvent the wheel if there's something that exists already? And it's actually primarily an Avalonia code base. So if we go to Avalonia UI, the main GitHub, and go into avalonia.xaml.behaviors, you can see this has a ton of new stuff we can learn about. Which is some behaviors built in that were kind of migrated from what you'd expect in WPF and UWP. And these are basically ports of behaviors that existed in the UWP apps, and they've brought it over to Avalonia. You can see, however, that this package has now been moved over to a new repository, and it's maintained unofficially as such by this person here. And you can see it's very active, so 2 weeks ago it's been updated. And we can import this library, this XAML behaviors library. Now inside of here we have things like the behaviors interactions, and if we scroll down you can see there's absolutely tons of stuff we can learn about here. So we can bind into like events, so when the page loads we bind into an event and then we focus an element. That's for like a text box focus, which we already do code for manually encode behind. So we could replace it with this kind of interaction behavior. You can do way more as well. You can bind into anything. So say here, they bind it into a text box, monitoring for a value. When it's greater than a certain value, they're then setting another property. So there's tons of power here. We scrolled all the way down. You've got all these kind of actions that can happen. We've got animations. We've got collection changed events, buttons. We have, if we go further down, And we have some core stuff. So for example, we should be able to just run a command. So call method, for example, to run anything on a view model. We might make use of that when we come to the drag and drop, because we're going to have to redo the sort list. But basically, this is a whole library that does a lot of things, including dragging and dropping. This is a trusted library as well. It's very well established, and it used to be an official Avalonia one. So we're going to install this and make use of it. The package we need to install is called xaml.behaviors.avalonia. So if we go to the NuGet packages and drag up, we want to type in we want to type xaml.behaviors, and then you can see here .avalonia, and this will install all of the behaviors. We can install, say, the draggable and drag and drop separately, but if we do the Avalonia, we're going to get all of the benefits. So if we install this into our desktop project, you can see that's now been added, and we want to install it into the main one as well. This is erroring, so I'm just going to do it manually. We just right click on here, edit the CS proj. We can just add it into here manually. If you compare that to the desktop, so if we edit CS proj, you can see xaml.behaviors.avalonia. Just copy that over, and then we'll paste it into here. It doesn't matter where, we'll just paste it there. And that's just due to the versioning issue that we handle versioning separately. And now we have that package installed, we can add drag and drop super easy. You won't believe how easy this gets. So all we have to do is tag this list box with a style that has draggable in it. So we could put the style in here, but if we want to reuse this to make other lists drag and droppable, we're going to put it in with the styles. So we'll just go into, I think just general styles for now, and we'll chuck it in here. So if we just go below here, let's just start a new style. And we'll just select on the, for now, is ListBox. So we want to select a ListBox, and we'll call it, say, draggable. That's what they do in the examples. So we'll just do the same thing. And then we want to apply this to the ListBox item, so each item that's draggable. So that's the selector that we want. And now inside of here, this is where we simply want to set the properties. So we'll do a setter with a property, and we'll do the z-index first, because what we want to do is set the actual items underneath the draggable items. So we'll just do a z-index of 0 for all items, which it should be by default, but we'll just override that anyway. And then finally, the only other thing we need to do is set this new property. So there's a new property using this library that we've just installed. We can access it with opening and closing of parentheses, and you have the interaction and then behaviors. So this is now how we access the inner behaviors if we want to set them on the actual ListBox item. And then inside here now, we can set up a behavior collection template, and then the behavior collection inside. So this is like setting an item template. We're basically setting the behavior collections. Inside of here now, we just need to add one thing, which is the item drag behavior. That's all we need to do. And this will now make the list draggable. One thing we will do though is when we click and drag to start a drag, we need to know how many pixels we want to move the mouse before it starts dragging. So for that, we'll just set a horizontal threshold of 3 and a vertical threshold of 3. So it's got to move like 3 pixels before the drag starts. And that's literally all the drag and drop done. So now we just need to tag it with a class called draggable to enable that. And if we go back to this ListBox, if you remember the styles, we made the style on the ListBox draggable. So we need to apply it on this ListBox here. And we can do that on a new line, and we'll put the classes here to draggable. And that is literally everything we need to do. So now the ListBox will drag and drop, we hope, if this all works. And couldn't load Avalonia XAML interactivity. And that's because if we look, it's added this to our package and set the version there. So it's set the version to 11.3.6.5 in the directory packages. And if we open that up ourselves, you can see the others are 11.3.4. So we want to change that to 11.3.4 to match. And now we should get it working. Or let's just upgrade everything else to 11.3.6 instead. Let's do it that way around. Let's upgrade the packages all at the same time. And toolkit MVVM is apparently the wrong package. So let's just go into NuGet and try and update everything. And that's everything updated to the latest. And now it's building. So hopefully we get no bugs added with the upgrades, and we just upgraded all the packages at the same time. And now we have the issue with Avalonia themes fluent. I've seen this bug before. Let's just clean the project and do another .NET restore. And now let's build again. I think it's just outdated packages. There we go. So now if we go to processes, if we click here now and drag, it doesn't work. And that's because we've put the draggable on the wrong class. This is on the available actions column. So if we see, I presume the available actions column will be draggable now. We need to move that to the correct place. But let's just see, is this column draggable? Yes, there you go. So you can see how the drag and drop's working. We can now drag and drop these, but we don't want that behavior over there. We just need to put this on the correct class. So that wants to be on the actions list, which is this class here, or this list here. Run that again, and now we should have what we want. There we go. So now we can drag items between. And you can see you can't drag out. And that will rearrange exactly as we want. So that's how simple it is. It's doing all the work for us. It's nudging the items between as we drag. And when we drop, it goes there. So the only other thing we really need to do now is if we edit the list, instead of showing, just for quickness, job name, let's just show the sort order again. This is something we need to now fix because we don't currently handle the list changing position and updating the order. So you can see now the sort order is completely out. It will fix it when it clicks save, but if there was something in this list that was reliant on that order, we kind of want to run the updated code. So what we want to run really is this function we made, which was in the view model. So it's in the process page view model. We want to run this. So we also want this now to be a relay command so we can access it in the UI, update actions, sort order. And let's see if we can use the new behaviors that we've learned. So in this behavior, we should be able to hook in to the collection changed, I believe it was. So there's a collection changed behavior, and then we want to trigger something and do something. So if we just look at the example, let's see if we can make use of this to actually do what we want. So we can see here we have interaction behaviors that's getting added to just a stack panel. So we have the interactions on the stack panel as an overall, which means it's going to happen inside of here. They've put it inside of here just so they can bind to the items. So at some point in our UI, we want to bind to that observable collection. We could then do an added, removed, reset, or more than likely we can just do this trigger here for, I presume, what is the general collection being changed. So let's try copying this interactive or interaction behavior and going into, say, the list that binds to these actions. Let's see if it can do these sub-actions. So we could bind it inside of the list just here, just to keep it all in one place, and add the behaviors in here. Now the behavior we want is when the collection changes. And when the collection changes, this will be this. So let's see if it can do binding to this. And then let's just change something obvious so we know. Now this target message, we can see in here, if we search for target message or target object as message text, you can see it's a named element here. So let's just do something similar for now. let's just chuck this in somewhere, or let's just name this. So x:\name equals test text. We will paste that in. We'll change the content to moved, something like that. And what we should see is where it says select action, if this does trigger correctly, whenever the collection changes, it's going to set it to this value. Now, this is probably going to trigger straight away. So I've got a feeling this is just going to change, which isn't ideal because we want it to only change when we drag and drop. But let's just see if that's even working in the first place. I presume this will bind and instantly change that text. So we go to here. No, it hasn't. So now if we drag and drop, and we're going to crash. So that's probably that being triggered, but what's it crashing on now? Can't find the property name, type text block. Content. Oh, that's because it's text. So we know that's actually worked. So now we go into here and we drag. You can see this text is still the same, which is good. So it hasn't fired by us pre-populating this list, which is what we want. If we drag, nothing's changed. If we drop, you can see it now says moved. It's also updated the save. So that's actually figured out that the collection's changed. And we could save. And I think if we save, now that hasn't refreshed that list. So if we toggle out and in, you can see it's refreshed. So as we suspected, because we're not pulling that and setting the update, that should have worked really when we saved. So first, let's just check why when we save, it didn't update the list. We want to call this right before saving, which means we probably want to call it inside of update item. So this is when we're updating or adding. So inside both of these really, we would want to call the update sort item list. And I believe this will be for every item. So this just means regardless of which item we are adding or updating. In fact, adding doesn't make sense because when you're adding it, it's being added to the list first or added to the database. So it only makes sense in the update. The update should always be called on the visible item because this will always act on the selected. But it's not the end of the world if somehow this accidentally called update on an item that wasn't visible. This would only update the visible item anyway. So that should solve the save issue. We should just automatically update the list right before saving. So if we now go to here, drag and drop, save, you can see that's updated the list for us, that's fine. But now what we want is when we're dropping, we want to update the list as well. And that is when this moved is hit. So we know the action here is working now, this change property action. So what we want to do is change this change property action to what I presume, and I haven't done this yet and used this, so we'll find out together, is in the core, I'm going to guess we can call this call method action. So we change this to a call method action, and then is it going to be a target object, and I presume this will be binding to the update command. If that's how you do it, which I presume it would be, makes sense, this should then call that action when we drop. And I don't think that's worked. Well, we can try. Let's just debug first in case it did run. And we just didn't, obviously. Something else wasn't working maybe. So drag and drop. No, so it's not hitting that. So we've done something wrong with there. So let's take a look at the sample. Let's see what we're doing wrong. So call method action, target binding. Okay, target binding is binding to binding, just target is binding, which will be the view model, and then method name is the method by the looks of it. So that will be the process page view model as binding, and then the method name will be that then, if that's the case, which isn't ideal because now that's a string, and if we rename the command, it's not going to find it. So we might do it another way. There we go. That's now going to try. Can't find the method name that on object process page view model that matches the signature, object, and sender. So is the one we can call for calling a command. invoke command actions. That's the one we want. So if we go to here, so it's not call method, it's invoke command. The target should now be that. Well, if it was called target, I think it was actually called command. Yeah, so command is there. That makes more sense. So now if we drag and drop, yes, there we go. So now it's updating every time we drop. So if we just change that back from sort order in the binding to job name. And that should be us wrapped up. That is now something that would be very complicated, made very easy thanks to this library. So we can now drag and drop this, and as we're dragging and dropping, say we put second to end, save, go out, go in, and you can see it's saved the position. We've disabled the drag and drop on there, which is fine. So that's it, that's the drag and drop done. That's working perfect.